From a highly anticipated addition to the beloved horror franchise to a lackluster, predictable retread, Scream 6 was the most disappointing film of 2023. Here's why. Let me tell you. As a horror fan, I've seen my fair share of crappy sequels in major franchises.
So where are you?
Your front porch.
But Scream, boy oh boy, each and every movie is a winner in my book. Seriously. So, naturally, when Scream 6 was about to come out, everyone was just as hyped. But I have some news that might make you want to scream. So, the movie just released, and I'm sorry to say, it was a real letdown. Now don't get me wrong, it's not as bad as some of the real stinkers out there, but it's not up to par with the rest of the Scream movies, and for several reasons. The whole New York City location felt like a missed opportunity, and the old school characters like Gale were just kind of there without any real purpose. And don't even get me started on the core four. It's hard to see them as either victims or suspects because they're just too damn valuable. So yeah, the end result was a lackluster and completely unscary movie that felt like it was just going through the motions. And honestly, I'm just disappointed because we know everyone involved with Scream 6 can do so much better than this. I have to admit, when I first heard that Scream 6 would be taking place in the Big Apple instead of Woodsboro, my horror-loving heart skipped a beat. The possibilities seemed endless. Imagine the terror of a masked killer stalking you through the subway, or the tension of a gunfight in a crowded bodega. I mean, there's a whole subgenre of horror movies set in New York City that are just amazing, i.e. Midnight Meat Train, anyone? So, needless to say, my expectations for the movie were sky high. Unfortunately, the reality didn't quite live up to the hype.
There are 2 killers in the original stab. I'm afraid someone's gotta die now.
No, Amber, I'm coming.
And speaking of reality, one of the main reasons the movie was disappointing was its lack of a real location. Yep, you heard that right. Turns out that the city featured in Scream 6 isn't actually New York City. I mean, do people really think people are that dumb? Because it's pretty easy to spot that the location isn't actually NYC. The college campus that Tara, Mindy, and Chad attend just didn't look like any of the colleges in the city. And apartments, police stations, and parks all felt way too generic and sterile to be NYC. And guess what? They actually weren't. The movie was mostly shot in Montreal, Canada, which explains why it all felt a bit off. Sacre bleu! Sure, movies often shoot in locations that aren't actually where they're set, but for a movie like Scream, location is everything.
Not in my movie.
The original movie was so effective because Wes Craven used the Northern California landscape to create a sense of isolation and vulnerability for Sydney when she was first attacked by Ghostface. And who could forget the chaotic party scene at Stu's house? It's all about using the location to create the scares. And while Woodsboro may not actually exist, it was a stand-in that felt appropriate for the small-town American setting. That's what makes it disappointing, that Scream 6 didn't utilize the NYC setting to its full potential. It felt like a missed opportunity. The problem with Scream 6's use of the NYC setting is that it feels generic and disconnected from reality. Sure, they name-drop Central Park and the Upper West Side, but when we actually see these locations on screen, they feel like generic stand-ins that could be anywhere. It's hard to suspend your disbelief and get lost in the story when the setting's lack of authenticity constantly yanks you out of it. And don't even get me started on that giant movie theater layer of Ghostface. It's so unbelievable that it's almost comical, and it really takes away from the overall effectiveness of the movie. In the end, they just failed to make the scares even more effective. Also, the main characters are way too safe. So basically, the core 4 have become a liability. Mindy and Chad are even less likely suspects, as they serve as comic relief and aren't given enough depth or development to be anything more than supporting players. As a result, the main mystery of the movie just lacks the tension and unpredictability that made the previous movie so thrilling. With the core 4 essentially untouchable, the only other options for the killer are either minor characters or legacy cast members, and neither of those possibilities feels particularly satisfying. It's a frustrating situation for fans of the franchise, who are left with a bland entry that doesn't advance the story in any meaningful way. It's true that death has always carried a significant weight in the Scream franchise. However, I would argue that the decision to spare Mindy and Chad's lives might have been a deliberate choice to subvert expectations and avoid predictability. After all, Scream has always been known for its twists and turns, and killing off the core 4 4 may have been seen as a predictable move. So by sparing their lives, the filmmakers may have left the door open for potential surprises and shocks in the upcoming films.
You might actually be the most derivative one of all. I mean, Christ, the same house.
Maybe so. But you forgot the first rule of surviving a stab movie. Never answer the...
I'm bored.
Wait!
Of course, only time will tell if this was a wise decision or not. And then there's the unsettling reveal. With a limited pool of suspects, the reveal of the killers in Scream 6 was less effective than it could have been. While it was surprising to learn that all three were working together, the lack of viable options meant that the twist wasn't as satisfying as it could have been. It also didn't help that the motivations for the killers were muddled and confusing, making their ultimate plan feel like an afterthought rather than a cohesive and well-thought-out scheme. In the end, Scream 6 suffers from a lack of meaningful deaths and a limited number of suspects.
I met Richie on the Stab subreddit. I've been obsessed ever since my parents bought this house. We realized pretty quickly we had similar ideas.
Wasn't that hard for me to find you in Modesto?
Which takes away from the tension and suspense that the franchise is known for. Speaking of predictability, Gale should have been killed. Sorry, not sorry, Courtney. But it's definitely about time. As I mentioned before, the core 4 have become a liability, and they're too scared to be touched now. The same is the case with Gale Weathers. While it's understandable that fans would be sad to see Courtney Cox's character go, her continued presence in the franchise is starting to feel forced and unnecessary. By keeping Gale alive, the filmmakers are limiting themselves and preventing the story from truly moving forward. It's time for the franchise to start taking risks and shaking things up, and killing off Gale would have been a bold move that could have reinvigorated the series. So basically, while the latest edition has its entertaining moments, it ultimately falls short due to its reliance on tired tropes, safe characters, and recycled storylines.
I still prefer the Babadook.
The franchise needs to start taking risks and exploring new territory if it wants to remain relevant and engage with audiences. While killing off beloved characters is always a difficult decision, it can also be necessary to keep a franchise fresh and unpredictable. But the writers for the movie missed an opportunity to shake things up. However, it's worth noting that the franchise has always been known for surprising its viewers, so the next installment could surprise us in unexpected ways. Whether or not Gale survives in the end, the important thing is that the story is told in a way that is engaging, suspenseful, and true to the spirit of the original Scream. So, what comes next? For a franchise that's been around for 25 years, Scream 6 was definitely not what we expected. I mean, it has the potential of being better than the movies released before it because, well, they've done it before. So we can only wait and hope that the next installment is better than this. And that's all I had to say about why Scream 6 was the most disappointing movie of 2023.